Hello there. The cat's well and truly out of the bag. The mainstream press failed us during the pandemic. The UK public, and in fact the public around the world, have been completely duped and misled by 99% of the mainstream press over the last 2 years. Our so-called news outlets have engaged in shameless, unquestioning, pro-government reporting, pushing a one-sided pandemic narrative with absolutely no attempt to get anywhere near the truth. Right from the very start, the vast majority of them were the cheerleaders for every lockdown and every restriction, always crying out for ever harder, ever longer restrictions. And initially for the UK, a large part of that may actually have been the Brexit angle. Because although we'd already legally left the European Union on the 1st of January 2020, if you remember, we were still locked into the EU machine via the withdrawal agreement Brexit implementation period, due to last until the end of 2020. And I do recall strident calls from the pro-EU lobby and press to extend that Brexit implementation period for another 2 years so that we could halt the Brexit trade deal negotiations and get the pandemic dealt with, then restart the Brexit talks afterwards. But in doing so, it would have given the pro-EU establishment more time to put their minds to reversing Brexit. So yes, I do think much of the initial press-driven alarm in the UK was a lot to do with putting as much pressure as possible on the government to halt the Brexit process. And they're also acutely aware that the more damage they can get imposed on the UK economy, the more chance there is, however slim, that the public will gradually turn to demanding we rejoin the EU for the sake of national survival, or more accurately, the financial survival of the people. You can hear the rusty cogs going around the media mind, thinking if we can turn the UK into a failed state, then we will have to rejoin the EU. But what they didn't factor in is that the EU would also be suffering, but in a much more fragmented way. So Brexit may have been a part of it at the start. But so is selling newspapers, TV advertising and generating internet page views by terror-driven clickbait. So the news outlet producing the most blood-curdling headlines and copy will win the day. No ethics there then. Ignore and silence anyone calling the whole operation as overreaction, and only concentrate on the horrors of it all. And the so-called journalists lined up to outdo each other's goriness. And all the questions that the little people wanted answers to were swept aside in the hunt for ever more scary forecasts. Only images of pain and death would do. There must be no hope, only the dark vision of an eternal struggle with this deadly invisible enemy. And the more that social and family life was damaged, the more they liked it, and the more articles they could generate, providing survival tips of how not to eat or drink too much in lockdown, etc. They avoided the simple questions like what's the difference between the words with and of, for example. Questions they are only now half-heartedly turning to. With some journalists now beginning to shift their narrative in the hope that we'll forget what they were writing only a few months ago. To do this, they will be relying more and more on that good old saying that today's newspapers are tomorrow's binliners. But they forget that the internet has a long and extremely accurate memory, and it's going to take them a lot of effort to clean that lot up. And the journalists continue to work and get paid while a large chunk of the population they were screeching to be locked down were forced onto or over the breadline and into the food banks. And remember that journalists were among the very few chosen people who were permitted to travel the country for their work. and some notable names in the press were caught out for disobeying the rules they themselves were demanding the rest of us blindly follow. And all this made the UK press the useful idiot for UK government nudge units that were employing their dark arts to destroy the nation's medical confidence and replace it with compliance. And right now, when the nation needs to rebuild that confidence, our press is notably absent. What we need is an equivalent in the UK to that editorial in Denmark's leading tabloid Ekstrabladet that roasts that country's press for being too compliant for far too long. But I won't be holding my breath waiting. It suited the press to be hanging on to the government coattails for various reasons, from mere sales to murkier questions about who holds the media purse and puppet strings, when what they should have been doing is asking penetrating questions. But far easier to take all the data and forecasts at face value while dismissing anyone who has taken the time to pick them apart and question the narrative, and ignoring those that pointed out the blindingly obvious that the forecasts were always overblown and never came to pass, so asked, why are we believing them this time? In fact, why did we keep on believing them, other than because the press kept mindlessly thrusting the forecasts as cast iron science down our throats? Oh, and hundreds of billions of UK money and trillions worldwide were siphoned off somewhere in the process, all facilitated by this scaremongering press. And it got to the point that the only game in town was finding reports of ever more scariants and putting the frighteners on us all over again. And worse, their almost criminal attempt to divide the country by demonising those that did ask questions about the inhuman restrictions imposed on us. The media attempted to make these people into the new other. A new other to be eradicated from society. Yes, that's what many of them were calling for, separation and permanent locking away. But now it's causing us difficulties in readjusting to the realisation that we are all safer than we thought. Because although Boris Johnson has eased just about all restrictions in England, other governments around the world and our UK devolved administrations, and even London, are still swept up in it all. They just cannot let go, especially in Scotland, where this whole scaremongering environment has been used by Nicola Sturgeon as a route to Scottish independence. And even now she's refusing to follow England and drop the mask mandates. Scots could be wearing those for years to come. Anything to be different. But one wonders how long her and Mark Drakeford in Wales will be able to convince their voters that being different to England really is required. But even now there are one or two journos at the gobshite end of the market raucously demanding that no jibby, no jobby mandates for health workers stay in place, calling those that refuse to comply menaces to society. When what they, as non-medically qualified media types, are doing is questioning the motives of the highly qualified medical experts. And all those journos do is throw insults at the non-compliant medics instead of asking why and trying to understand. As I said, gobshites. And on that, it is good to hear that that particular mandate is headed for the back burner and may actually be ditched. And the sooner that happens, the safer the NHS will actually be. And what will the gobshites be saying then? Hopefully no one will be listening. And throughout this whole saga, the social media giants were not much better either. In fact, they towed the official line with an almost unmatched zealotry. While nasty organisations hell-bent on societal destruction and worse used the services of the likes of Twitter and Facebook, anyone questioning marks or lockdowns was summarily rejected. The twisted thinking of social media takes some beating. And any of us that tried to raise pandemic-based issues either had to tread on the proverbial eggshells or got content taken down for our trouble. Or we were forced to use smaller platforms with far smaller audiences. This has not been a good period for freedom of expression or robust journalism. But don't worry, the media will soon be employing their newfound skills on the settled science of climate change. Watch this space. So what's your opinion on how the press has acted during the pandemic? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.